5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fred.
This is the Driverless New Normal debate, the best of times or the toughest of times. Hi, I'm Fred Fishkin. Thank you for joining in to watch or listen, and we hope you're staying safe and well. This is a live and we expect lively debate pitting Princeton University professor Alan Kornhauser against Silicon Valley Mobility Managing Director Sven Biker. Those of you who registered early enough on Zoom will be able to participate along with an amazing group of sharks, including Jim Scheinman, founding managing partner of Maven Ventures, Jane Lappin, recently retired from Toyota Research Institute, co-chair of the Automated Vehicle Symposium, Brad Templeton, digital age pioneer, author, and self-driving car consultant, and Michael Senna, also a well-known consultant and editor of the Dispatcher newsletter. And our moderator to kick things off is Compass Transportation and Technology President and founder, Dick Mudge. Dick?
Thank you, Fred. I'll run quickly through the schedule today. We'll have a 10-minute debate between Sven and Alan. They'll have 4 minutes of rebuttal. Then we'll have 20 minutes or so of debate among the sharks. We'll have 20 minutes or so for Q&A from the audience. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. Please type into that and give us your questions. We'll pick the questions we pick will be arbitrary, but not random. If things go on a long time, we will be willing to stay on afterwards. The only thing I'll say is we stay beyond an hour. We have to pay the sharks time and a half. Luckily, none of the sharks are members of a union, so we should be okay. Shall we start the debate now? Sven?
Sounds good. Absolutely.
Just a technical note, YouTube doesn't seem to have gone up, so someone might want to look at that.
You want to fix that while I get started or what? Or do we want to wait?
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, let me start with this. I would have a hard time calling anything the best that is related to COVID-19. I rather want to say that my thoughts really go out to those who suffer hardship, and I hope we will get through this at some point. With that in mind, I want to make clear that these are for sure very difficult times. Those who know me realize that I would never use terms like age of foolishness, epoch of incredulity, or season of darkness. Therefore, you also realize I did not write the invitation. In fact, it was not checked with me, but at least the website got corrected, at least something. And still, those who know me also know that I tend to stay away from anything good or bad thinking, because I've come to realize those don't work. The world isn't one-dimensional, described by 2 endpoints. Thankfully, the world is multidimensional, which, however, it makes it also tough to navigate. In that context, these are less happy times right now, which is why I will share some cautious rather than glorious thoughts. Well, we've been promised a lot. Take those 2016 announcements, the big frenzy just 4 years ago. Apple's car expected to launch by 2021 with self-driving features. BMW, Intel, and Mobileye to bring fully autonomous driving to streets by 2021. Ford will have a fleet of self-driving taxis in public by 2021. Nissan will have autonomous cars in urban conditions in 2020. And Comma AI's, I think this is what Brad showed earlier as a backdrop, Comma AI's $9.99 autonomous driving add-on was supposed to be shipped by December 2016. And also in 2016, Tesla launched all new cars with full self-drive hardware. Well, I mean, this current situation should be perfect time for AVs. No one on the road, people stay away from other people, home delivery being the solution for everything. But where are those AVs? They had 10 years to prepare for this. The auto industry would have developed 2 completely new generations of vehicles in that time and still be bashed for it because they are so slow. Hey, smart home delivery robots, where are you? I keep sitting by my window out here in Palo Alto, but I haven't seen a single one. The closest I have seen was a kid with a remote controlled race car That actually reminds me of my younger self in April 1986, right after Chernobyl. People had over 30 years to bring automated vehicles to the road. So this could have been your best time. But instead, it just might be the toughest of times, as the realization is going to be that they don't work as advertised. Or how about March 2011, after Fukushima? We had quite some time to prepare for today. Or how about those wildfires here in California? Or how long has the big one been overdue here in California? And before we go into the debate, I want to emphasize that this should not only focus on the current pandemic and be something like, we are all deer in the headlight. We could observe already throughout last year, so in 2019, that the tide was beginning to shift. And as someone earlier put it this year, the days of burning cash in parking lots are over. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the headlines from just the last 12 months. And by the way, Tesla's Autonomy Day was just almost exactly 370 days ago, when Elon Musk promised 1 million robotaxis on the road by this year. But other headlines from the last 12 months, to have self-driving cars at scale is going to take a long time. Uber in April of last year. We overestimated the arrival of autonomous vehicles. Ford, also April last year. Apple acquires Drive AI in June of last year. GM Cruise delays its plans to launch in 2019, July last year. Or Starsky Robotics failed just in March of this year. And recently, the leaders of the movement also seem to join me in my cautioning. The first applications are closed. Ubiquity is further away than most people would believe. John Krafcik, just a little bit over a year ago. And now, what are the headlines today? Coronavirus halts autonomous vehicle testing, VentureBeat. Number of startup layoffs surpassed 20,000 amid COVID-19 pandemic, Crunchbase. Founders, executives, and analysts agree that self-driving car companies are in for a bumpy ride. Bloomberg just last week. What more do you need? Doesn't this sound like the best of all times? Sounds pretty tough to me.
Speaking of the best of all times, it's about time to give Alan his chick shot.
All right, let's go, Alan. I call this the tough times ahead.
Well, Sven, yes, I guess, you've made your points, although I sort of kind of like Ben Franklin, out of adversity comes opportunity. And in fact, basically prefer to look at the silver lining that all this offers. And as you know, I prefer to call these things smart driving cars because I don't like any of these. And you comment about ubiquity. I mean, whoever threw that out there? We're not ubiquitous in the human-driven cars that we have today, even though the advertisements from the car manufacturers make it out to seem that we can drive them down this creek or in 18 feet of snow or whatever when they try to sell these things to us. But in fact, what we have is really two different classes of vehicles that we're dealing with in this automation. And in these classes of the vehicles, they really separate out between those that require a competent and attentive driver and those that don't or don't even want one or prefer not to have one. These are two very different entities. And I think that what this pause in all the economy that we're into these days allows us a way to step back and take a look at how do we make both of these things flourish the best. In the first, the one that requires us to be competent and attentive, the foremost and important aspect of that is safety. The objective is the improvement of safety. Why? Because the competent and attentive driver, it's not that they're not competent or not attentive, but at times they aren't attentive. And they're human, and what that human aspect leads is to misbehavior by them. And we're finally seeing that we want to develop this technology to basically be a safety aspect that keep us, in case we misbehave, from getting between the rock and the hard place. The purpose of this technology ends up to be to save the day when we misbehave as drivers. And I believe the OEMs have been stepping up to finally seeing this, to moving beyond capabilities of just advice to actually have systems operating in the background that will take over and save the day. Some of the videos that have come out from Tesla to me are really very impressive, where in fact autopilot isn't on explicitly by the driver, but is running in the background and kicks in and ends up saving the day, which is really where this technology needs to be. It's finally maybe a realization by at least one, if not the rest of the OEMs, that in fact the person, the driver, that human driver isn't so sacrosanct and always knows the right answer, that in fact the opportunity to have this as a backup to them is really good. Not selling many cars these days, this gives the OEMs an opportunity that when they crank up their assembly lines again after this is over, that in fact they'll be able to put in there the better software, the better hardware that will allow these vehicles to actually deliver the maximum safety objective out of that. And that in fact this is an enormous opportunity for them to do that. What they've also had is the opportunity to continue to develop these things. You say, hey, there's no testing out there. My goodness, where's the biggest challenge of these? It's in the software. Guess what? The gals and the guys that are writing the code, they have nothing else to do these days but write code. Guess what they're doing? They're writing code like it's going out of style. And in fact, they don't need to be out there on the roads, because they've developed simulation software that sit there and really test this stuff. And in fact, many of the developers have developed so-called a version at this point. What they need to do is have the opportunity to go to the next version. This gives them sort of a pause where people like Jim aren't just pounding on them to get the damn thing out, that in fact, now they have the opportunity to go from version X to version X+1. That is, oh my goodness, all of a sudden that means that what's coming out is even better, is going to actually be able to deal with the safety. The other piece of this technology is the other one, where in fact, you don't want the human in the loop. In fact, it's to get the human the heck out of the loop, because the human's the problem. That's the driverless piece. Unfortunately, where we were headed in the driverless piece was this some vision of providing mobility to those that already have too many ways to get from A to B. Give them another option and so on. My goodness, that's not the people that can benefit from that. It's the people that have really been marginalized or really have mobility or the mobility disadvantaged. Those are the people that need this mobility. And in fact, if one looks at that mobility disadvantage, who are they? They're, of course, the people that are physically and mentally challenged. Absolutely, they've needed that.
That's a good time to let Sven.
Well, I can't go on and finish. Okay, what, did I end my 5 minutes? Damn it.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
you passed the 5 minutes.
I'll jump in. But let me mention, just finish up that sentence. It's more importantly, the people who chose, either for whatever reason, to not drive their personal car. And that includes the young, the 10 to 17 who aren't permitted, the old who have decided they shouldn't be doing it, and of course the poor. And right. That's the big one. And in fact, taking these mobility machines that can just go out there and provide mobility to those folks, that's the important piece that we can get to once this pandemic is over.
You lose 1 minute on your rebuttal and
Oh.
it keeps going. Assuming I can stop
Sven,
you.
sorry.
All right, no worries, Alan. I think we actually agree on quite a few things.
Well, of course we agree.
One is that these people have a clock that's running faster than our clocks that we use in order to rehearse this, because 5 minutes went by just like this. We also agree on a number of things, how important safety is. And Alan, with all due respect, your speech you just gave, you could have given 5 years ago, 8 years ago. So you laid out in a very nice and concise way all the advantages of autonomous vehicles that we've been promised by various people over and over again. And I guess you and I, we've also been part of that movement. So that's good. But I really want to disagree with you when you talked about the software developers. For one, they might be watching Netflix or something like this and they employ us just to know. But I find it, Alan, if you allow, dangerous to say they don't need to be out there. Because in the last 10 years, and I say this as someone who's always also very well connected with an academic activities, it is dangerous if the development of autonomous vehicles happens really in a room without realizing what traffic actually is. And traffic, and maybe that's an interesting picture here to talk to sharks as well, it's not like who survives, it's a collaborative effort. And therefore just does not only need software, it needs infrastructure. And just we have not been able to develop the infrastructure that goes, in order to quote Elon Musk, actually all the way from purposely well-painted lane markings all the way, in my mind, to communication infrastructure. We don't have this. So therefore, for the foreseeable future, completely driverless vehicles, as Alan pointed out, will, I think, be a thing of the future. I think if we build infrastructure for it, and if we maybe consider teleoperation, which more and more companies are working on, you might have talked about this, that's a thing from the last 2 or 3 years, getting more attention, we might get there. But other than that, I think it's too theoretical, and therefore we will have an even nicer debate here in practice.
So what can you say, Alan, when he leads off and says the two of you agree?
Well, I say we agree on most of it, and absolutely safety. What I didn't get to say earlier is that with a driverless vehicle, the objective is not safety. Safety is a necessary condition. It's a floor. If we are not better, if we're not safe, and what is the definition of safety? It's the perception of safety. It's the fact that people in the neighborhoods will allow these vehicles to operate in their neighborhoods. It's the fact that people will be willing to get in them and take a ride. It's the fact that people will be willing to pay whatever it is to do that. That's the definition of safety. It's not something that, in fact, some of the government is going to run down and put on us. No, this thing, if it's going to scale, it has to scale in the marketplace. It has to be accepted in the marketplace. And it has to deliver the value to that marketplace that, in fact, says, yes, I want to go out there and use it. In terms of doing it, of course, you need to be out there operating, but all you need to do is operate in the corner cases or find the corner cases. You don't need to run who knows what down some road that has no traffic in it. And of course, why run today? Because there's no traffic out there. It's just not, hey, if your system can't do that, you shouldn't be in this business. The idea is to be out there and doing it. If we require infrastructure, we're dead on arrival.
Yeah, okay,
absolutely dead on arrival. And the reason why we're dead, and this is why the systems have to be able to do it themselves. The intelligence, if we want to call it intelligence, it really isn't intelligence, but if the intelligence, they need to be intelligent enough. We don't want to coordinate them like an orchestra. We aren't coordinated out there like an orchestra, and we do pretty well, thank you. I think we need to allow them to be able to out there and operate and not require anything more than, please just paint. Okay. Why can we ask for paint? Is because I need paint. You need paint. Okay.
Okay. So, can we jump to the
now
sharks?
We'll get the sharks in there. Anyway,
Brad, do you have something to say on all this?
Well, of course, as usual, they're both wrong.
So Absolutely,
Actually,
I agree.
they're actually not. They're both. Some of them, they both said valid things and invalid things. And Alan, you're quite correct in criticizing the idea that testing today is some kind of issue. Obviously, in fact, it's an irony that all of these cars probably could even be delivering safe service today, but nobody sat down a year ago and said, "Why don't we plan to see what we can do on empty roads?"
And tell us, Brad, why they are not doing this. Tell us.
Well, first of all,
this.
if non-essential travel has been declared illegal in all the places that they operate, so they don't want to break the law.
Don't say it's a legal thing again.
Well, it is. No, I mean, it is illegal to be going out and traveling for what's not considered an official essential purpose under the current COVID laws. But it's not very useful. Testing right now would not be very useful. And so they will get back to testing. It is essential to test on the road, as Anna says. By the way, I wanted to actually just contradict something you said about the delivery robots. I realize in Palo Alto you're not seeing them all the time, but if you expand your world a bit and go out to Mountain View, very far away from Palo Alto, you'll find that Starship, one of the companies I'm involved with, is doing deliveries constantly from a grocery store there on Castro Street, and we have made over 100,000 deliveries around the world now, and that number is growing, and people are going nuts for delivery. So that one's there. The other ones, you seem to be saying, oh my God, these companies announced dates in 2020 or in 2021 and they didn't deliver. Like, wow, okay, you're shocked. Someone named a date for a radical new and almost previously considered impossible technology, and they didn't hit it to the year. And this is a sign to say, oh my God, things are going terribly. What are we going to do? The reality is, of course, it takes longer than people predict, even when you factor in the rule that it always takes longer than you predict. You add to that the fact that the big auto OEMs, frankly, they were shocked when non-car companies like Google started getting in this game, and the automotive press started saying, oh my God, the future of the car is a search engine company. This caused them to say, this is our nightmare. And that's why they started building the projects they built and named the dates that they named, so that they could not be seen as being so far behind. They would love for it to happen more slowly. Their industry is going to be disrupted, turned upside down. If you're a big incumbent, the last thing you want is for that to happen at the pace of startups. You don't want it to happen at all, but if it does happen, you want it to be at your pace.
Tell us about your experience in the automotive industry, Brad.
In my experience in the automotive industry?
Yes.
No, I'm the outsider. I'm the person who comes.
But you are talking about it as if you know what they want.
Well, I talk to them.
Car behind you, Brad. When you got in the car behind you for the very first time, what was your expectation? When is it going to be coming to the market?
Well, that was back in 2009. And Chris Urmson at that time, I actually showed him video of this. He didn't like it, but saying 2020, actually back in 2009. It's been a commonly named date. This is a radical new technology. It's one of the hardest engineering problems that there's been. And I'm not at all surprised that you've seen Gartner's hype cycle. Of course, when something is valuable, it gets hyped even more. It is going to disappoint for a little while, and then it will stop disappointing.
Yeah, can we switch sharks?
You can switch sharks, or I had some other quick points to make, but I'll get to them afterwards, and let's switch.
Yeah, that's what we're running. Yeah, Jim, you've been in the business. You've actually invested in these companies that are going to make a huge amount of money. What do you think about the market where we are? Are we that far ahead that we shouldn't be taking it seriously?
I think, look, I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to self-driving cars, in large part to what Alan was saying earlier. There's so many good reasons why this needs to happen. And to Brad's point, this is such hard technology that these dates are going to be wrong. Clearly Sven is right also that this is a bump in the road. But actually, let me be very clear. I pity those OEMs that look at this as the death of AV. I mean, this is going to be the death of their business if they don't continue to push forward aggressively. I want to be clear that, at Maven Ventures, we're still investing in AV. We're still investing in this technology, in these platforms. We've been, we're very fortunate. I was on the board and early investor at Cruise. I'm a big believer in what they're doing. There's no reason for these companies now, the Cruises of the world, the Waymos, to be aggressive on dates anymore. And that's why we're not hearing that. As be clear that they're pushing really hard and aggressive. They just don't need to tell us about it anymore. And so, I think that leads to a lot of confusion in the marketplace.
It is really important that they do it well and do it safely.
Yeah.
Because if we have another trip up like Uber did in Arizona, we're going to be 10 more years at this thing.
That's right. And by the way,
that's going to ruin it for everybody.
Uber wasn't ready for that. 100%. I went on the record saying that was horrible that happened, and that was Uber's fault. They weren't ready for prime time, and they stopped it after. Let me just say, like, I think this is going to accelerate two things. One thing that Brad mentioned, the non-passenger AV stuff. We had a company called Marble, which kind of pivoted outside, unfortunately, away from that. But Starship and these companies, May Mobility, one of our businesses in Detroit, doing non-passenger delivery is going to be really, really powerful in the pandemic and post-COVID time. And in the background, you see I put up Embark, one of our company's self-driving trucks. The amount of items that are being shipped now, obviously with Amazon going crazy and all, what we have to do is just pushing this technology so that you're going to see more and more advances there much faster. I do agree that one of the things that are going to change is around simulation software, virtual testing. I think that you have to have on-street testing and real-life testing, but because of where we are, the simulation virtual testing is going to get better. This is going to be one of the massive advantages that we're going to see post-COVID-19. And the last one I want to mention is, and I think this is potentially really interesting. I'm not an expert in this area, but I think that maybe we'll see more cooperation. By the way, this is the Origin, the Cruise Origin that I'm driving in now myself. But I think there might be more cooperation with public and private AV transportation, and that actually might be a really good thing. And I think that might actually push this even further along faster. So I see a lot of positives. I do see a bump in the road, a little blip. It's going to slow things down temporarily, and then it's going to be a massive increase post-pandemic. And again, I pity those OEMs that don't see that.
Yeah, Jane, do you have any comments on this? That this is a bump in the road to the and glory is coming very quickly? Or
well, I agree with Jim about the work that must be going on now in the background. While the vehicles can't operate on the road, it's a great opportunity to be working in simulation and work through some of the really hard challenges without the interruption of going out on the road. But what I'm reflecting on are the comments about infrastructure and the opportunity that infrastructure and leadership from the US DOT could offer to the industry were the DOT to invest in good pilot programs where infrastructure was created and set aside for integrated AV demonstrations. Level 3 is sufficient with the right infrastructure to improve throughput, improve safety, reduce environmental challenges, and with US DOT money to measure the impacts and to understand, what the value is, what the full value is to society of accelerating the integration of highly automated vehicles where they can be safely segregated.
I must say that's a radical idea. US DOT is a leader in the technology world.
It's happened. It happened 20-something years ago. Dick, you and I were evaluating field operational tests when the first navigation devices were coming onto the road.
As much as I love Jane, I'm going to have to disagree with that later, but let the other show speak.
As much as I love Jane, I'm going to have to didisagree with that later, but sorry, Jane.
I'm glad we got some excitement.
Michael,
Michael, your turn. You have your own unique view, and I don't know whether things look different from Sweden.
I'm coming to you live from Sweden, where we have a very different approach to dealing with the COVID-19. I think most of you know that we aren't practicing lockdown. Our officials are telling us that we're following an evidence-based approach. We'll see whether the evidence points in the right direction or in another direction, but hopefully it will. We're also following the guidelines of WHO. But this is why our health authorities aren't suggesting that we inject ourselves with chlorine and ingest Lysol. True scientists and engineers have always followed an evidence-based approach. One area that I feel, and those of you who followed my newsletter, The Dispatcher, for the last 6 years will be familiar with this view. We don't seem to be following an evidence-based approach when it comes to investment in lawmaking in replacing human drivers with robots. It seems the principal problem that we have with putting robots instead of humans is that they solve very few existing problems, but they cause a whole lot of new ones. The two problems that they solve is projecting military force without putting soldiers in the line of fire. That's how all of this started many years ago, 16, 17 years ago. And the other one, which is one of the reasons that people are putting money into companies like Uber, is that they save the cost of a driver, a taxi driver. Now, I know that we have discussed the whole issue of safety, and safety was used initially as the main reason for taking humans out of the equation and putting robots in there. But if we actually look at the numbers, people say, well, we're going to save 95% of the 2 million lives that are lost each year. It's not possible to take a global figure of 2 million deaths and generalize from that number. Of the 2 million vehicle-related deaths that occur globally each year, under 5%, that's 80,000 of those, are in North America and the EU countries. The majority of those deaths, 2 million, are in countries where there are poor roads, poor cars, poor regulations that are poorly enforced. And the people in those countries are not going to be able to afford robot chauffeured vehicles in the foreseeable future. That's just not going to happen.
No, that's right.
Second, in the richest countries, close to 60% of fatal accidents occur on rural roads. 6% of those are on motorways. 30% of road fatalities are caused by alcohol impaired drivers. In Connecticut, 80% of the fatalities are related to drunken driving. We could stop drunken driving tomorrow by simply putting alcohol locks on our vehicles. 2% of all fatalities occur from running red lights. We could stop those accidents and those fatalities tomorrow. We can do so many things. We do not need to put robots in vehicles to take over from humans. I've said this for the last 6 years. I'm going to continue to say it.
Well, of course, Michael, I disagree with you somewhat vehemently, but it was part of sort of what I was saying. The objective of taking people out of cars is not safety. Safety is a necessary condition, not an objective. The objective is providing mobility for those who don't have good mobility now. To me, that's the objective. The people, the mobility disadvantages, I call them. The people that we can't serve, however much money we throw to New Jersey Transit or whatever. Why? Because those systems have been designed not to go where these people go. So in fact, the real value of taking the person out of there is to try to get to an affordable way to provide mobility for the kind of mobility that people need, which happens to be from anywhere to anywhere. It's not down a nice little corridor in which all the glit and all the whatever and all the rich people live and the rich people work. It's from everywhere to everywhere. And that's the reason to do this, is to improve the quality of life of the people that have been left behind because they don't have the mobility. Now, if that's what we focus on and do that, and are able to then bring out and provide that kind of the technology to do that, then of course, if anybody else wants to jump on, of course, jump on. We'll charge you a little bit more because we want you to cross-subsidize it too, and you should pay for it.
It's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. And I mean, it's really about turning mobility from a product into a service. It's about selling rides instead of selling cars. And that does enable these people you've just spoken about. And Michael, you're completely wrong. You're like those people who saw that a small hard drive cost $5,000 in 1982 and said, these expensive things will certainly never help low-income people. Technology that's driven by computer technology becomes super cheap on an exponential curve as time goes on.
Brad, who do you think are driving the buses?
Who's driving the buses? I mean,
yeah, rich people who are working at Google. They're not driving the bus. The people who are driving the buses where I live. Yeah, I'm not talking about bus drivers. I'm talking about people with jobs. If you eliminate a bus driver, you've eliminated a job.
That is correct.
50% of the bus drivers.
Machines have been replacing humans at their jobs for close to 200 years. 200 years ago, in fact, all but 2% of us worked in agriculture. Machines replaced every single one of those jobs, and it actually turned out okay.
But nobody's going to
No, it
replace a
hasn't.
bus driver, Michael.
I don't want to go down.
I don't replace a bus driver.
I don't want to go down the job one.
I just still need bus drivers.
I don't want to go down the job one. I mean, we could do a whole hour on the job one. But
yes, we could.
Yeah, I want to say that you both miss it. It isn't. You're right. It is safety is a big important purpose, and helping the poor get rides is a big important purpose. But the dramatic changes that come when mobility, which is 25% of the energy we consume in the rich countries, 25% of the greenhouse gases, the largest purpose of our cities, when that is changed from product to service. Now, I want to briefly go to what Jane said, though, about infrastructure, because I completely disagree with that. I believe that in fact, the wonderful thing about this technology is, in fact, I've even called it the first law of robocars, is you do not change the infrastructure. You drive on the roads you're given, you drive the world you're given, you don't expect the world to change for you to solve this problem. And the reason is software just works on a completely different time scale from infrastructure. With infrastructure, getting the permits and the approval and the planning and the construction takes so long that almost every time, not every time, but almost every time, the software people will have solved the problem by the time you're getting the trucks rolling to build the infrastructure, and you're mostly creating a construction zone that annoys them to build infrastructure they no longer need. So I think we should only consider the very few smallest infrastructure plans. If you give me a plan for 2030 today, I can guarantee you that plan is wrong. All right, I don't know why it's wrong, but I can guarantee you that it's wrong. And so the only way to do this in the modern computer-controlled world is to expect that you can plan only for 2030 with the knowledge of 2028, not with the knowledge of 2020. And anyone who tries to build infrastructure has to do it with the knowledge of 2020. So.
Hey, Brett, I want to add a little bit to your excitement regarding software. My understanding is, as an engineer, that software and computer programs are great to do something incredibly accurate, incredibly fast, and repeatedly so over and over again, if they are pre-programmed to do that.
Yeah, that's the old man thinking on software like me.
You cannot pre-program necessarily all these situations. And this is again what I said in my opening statement. It's not a one-dimensional problem where you say you do this and then you get there. It's multi-dimensional. You don't know really what to expect. And therefore, we need a hybrid approach of something pre-programmed onto the vehicle. We need the best sensors probably that are available. And then we also need some embedment into the overall system that we call traffic, which is the collaborative approach.
Yeah. Well, we will do things, but we'll do them virtually, not physically. So infrastructure that you call virtual infrastructure, maps, networking, cloud services, not cars talking to cars.
Tell us about networking. What do you mean by networking?
I mean, that's the ability of data to flow from servers to vehicles.
So, and that is infrastructure, right? So
well, it's not. It's virtual infrastructure, as I would call it. That data infrastructure.
Well, of course, I mean, you don't send a letter to a vehicle like, "Here's my position, here's my speed," and you send a physical letter. Of course, it's virtual. I mean, we understand that, Brad.
Okay, well, not everybody does. Not everybody does. You go to FHWA and all these other people; they think they're talking about building physical things.
I don't think so, Brad. No. You've been following all the DSRC work for a long time as well. And I think we both agree it was not perfect. Let's don't go into details. It is certainly something that needs to be realized as well. And that it's a huge effort to put this together like a virtual infrastructure, of course. But look, and especially at this times, we are connecting each and everything. We are talking about an app to track a pandemic. We are wearing smartwatches. We are connecting refrigerators and TVs and all of this to make world safer, potentially, better, hopefully. And the only thing we are not connecting is automobiles. Some of the most dangerous things out there.
No, we're going to connect them.
That I find surprising.
We're going to connect them. It's just the idea of them talking to each other makes computer security people laugh when I tell them that hey, car people think all the cars are going to talk to each other. They just giggle and at the naivety.
So why do they laugh? Right?
They giggle. They giggle because they've been working on hard.
Wait a minute! I don't want my car controlled by some system. I want America where I'm independent.
And why they laugh? And
wait a
don't help
minute.
make it better.
Because computer security people know that building complex, 2,000 kilogram robots, have them exchange messages with every random other device that they encounter on the street, and making that secure is currently beyond human competence.
But they
and
can
while
drive.
that doesn't,
but those same robots can drive.
Earlier. in 2020 maybe, but maybe works in 2025. And now you can dig out your old hardware problem from 1990.
The reason the computer security people
Brad,
laugh is
let's let Michael jump. Brad, let's let Michael jump in.
I'll just answer Sven's question. The reason they laugh is they would love to see it possible to make computers more secure, but they don't believe it's the car engineers who are going to be the ones to solve this problem that everyone is working really hard on and has been for decades. They hope it will be solved someday.
We need to move.
Brad, you know who's laughing most? You know who's laughing most? I just saw today. I saw a report by JD Power, and I think we know JD Power is evidence-based. They think the people who are laughing are the people who are buying cars. It's they said, frankly, we're concerned for automakers. They're pushing forward with technology that consumers seem to have little or no interest in, nor are they making strides needed to change people's minds. Especially now, automakers need to reevaluate at where they're spending money. They're investing billions in these technologies, but they need also to invest in educating consumers. Lack of knowledge is a huge roadblock for future adoption. They don't know what driverless cars is, and they don't care. Mm-hmm. They don't want a driverless car. They don't care. They don't want even electric cars. They don't want these things.
To misquote Henry Ford, Henry Ford never said, but it's a great phrase, that if I'd asked them what they wanted, they would have wanted a faster horse.
Please don't quote Henry Ford.
I'm misquoting him. I'm misquoting him. But I believe that statement is true.
Let's move on, and maybe, I mean, we could go on this for a long time, but we got a number of people who may want to hear other people. Jane, do you have any other comments about USDOT leading the charge in infrastructure?
No, I think that USDOT is missing an important leadership opportunity. I wouldn't argue that they make any expensive alterations in infrastructure. I think that dedicated lanes in critical areas, dedicated regions in certain cities would allow automakers, the tech companies, the general public to understand better how these vehicles can integrate into our lives, what the criteria are for safe operations, legal issues, and it helps to educate general consumers about why they might want one of these vehicles to provide mobility services to them in the future. So back to the USDOT stepping forward alongside the tech companies and leading according to the legislation that authorizes the DOT to invest in pilots and evaluations to inform us all.
Yeah. Before we turn to Q&A, Jim, do you want to have the last word among the sharks? I'm curious. Michael said something about if we're really serious about safety, autonomous vehicles is not the way to go.
Yeah, I'll just answer from, I guess, a classic Silicon Valley early stage tech investor. When we see new technologies that are potentially frightening or very confusing, or we just don't understand, the human nature is just to say, I don't know, I don't want it. Now, I'll give you an example of something completely outside of AV. I was involved in the very first social network before Facebook and all the stuff we see now called Friendster. And I was in my late 20s, early 30s at the time. And I told my friends, you're going to love this thing. You're all going to put a picture of yourself on the internet. You're going to put photos of your kids and all your information. You're going to use it all the time to stay in touch with me. I was in the West Coast, they were in the East Coast. And they looked at me like, are you crazy? I will never, ever do that. People are going to steal my kids and come into my house and rob me when I'm like, and like, my point is, I think it's the same kind of, by the way, same thing with Uber, Airbnb, the list goes on and on. My point with when I said earlier, and Alan made this point too, there are a dozen reasons why we are going to have self-driving cars, from safety to helping people who can't drive to being more affordable. Right now, the most expensive product we purchase often is our car that sits idle for 98% of the time. I mean, there's just pollution. Think about all the reasons why this makes sense. We are going to get there, and this is why this is going to be widely adopted in our lifetime.
And I did not disagree with the point that we're going to get there, to make this clear, right? So I only said it's going to get tougher. And I never said that the automotive OEMs basically proclaim the death of the AV.
Thank you, Sven. See that? I won.
I saw it coming already last year, I think. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be exciting.
It is exciting.
They have scaled back their teams, though.
Dick.
Yeah, let me attempt to move to the Q&A. We can have this
back as well.
We can have this conversation for a long time. We have a bunch of questions and answers, questions. One of them comes from Doug Rubin, who talks about he's sold on what AV can do, but he says we're waiting. And he talks about challenges, whether it's technology, finance, cultural, but then says he thinks the biggest challenge is regulatory. Are you guys worried about that? Is that the biggest challenge out there?
So
No,
I'm
because
personally
most
not.
of them is.
And I think the regulation that we see for now for especially testing of automated vehicles, I think that's being developed alongside with the technology progress. And I also see that there are some executive orders, namely, for instance, in Phoenix, where say, well, that seems to be all right, let's do it, let's see how it goes. So regulation is not a concern in my mind.
I think I agree with Sven on that one. I think most of the regulators have been sitting on the sideline. They've let us do pretty much what we want to do. I've argued that Uber lost $60 billion because they screwed up with one thing. There is such pressure on everybody doing this that it be done right, because anybody that's in there has the ranch on the table, and they can lose the ranch if they screw this one up. And so in a sense, we don't need public sector looking. We should be going together with the public sector, working hand in hand to make this happen for the right reasons. And I've explained what the right reasons are. We need to create a welcoming environment out there so that the public is willing to go along with us on this technology.
Yeah, the biggest problem is not the regulation, Jane.
I would say that there's a lot of concern around level 1, 2, and 3, where the human driver is tuning out of the driving task and degrading safety as a result. But in my experience working with regulators over the last several years, they're listening very carefully, and they're trying not to get ahead of the technology. Go ahead, Brad.
Which is very good.
The biggest problem isn't the regulation. It is actually the internal QA thing, the proving to yourself. The companies have to prove to themselves that they've made a product safe enough that they can take the risk of deploying it on the roads. And there is anyone who has named a date to Sven or any of us has known they were lying, because there's not a date that this is ready. The time this ships is the day that proof has been done. You've proved to your lawyers, you've proved to yourselves, and eventually to the public and to the governments that you've made it safe enough. And that's the real thing. The American regulators have actually been quite enlightened. I'm not sure that's been as true in Europe and in certain other places, but there's going to be jurisdictional competition around the world, and that will deal with these regulatory questions.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think I'm actually surprised at how quickly the regulators are supporting this technology. And I was thinking a lot about it. And the truth is, the regulators also have kids that are drinking and driving and getting hurt or killed. And they also are facing the same issues that we all are, and understand the reasons why this technology needs to be on the roads today and quickly. And that's why they're in favor of this.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm impressed. So far, regulators have not screwed up. It's nice to see. By the way, let me go to another question here.
And just quickly to Brad's point, Europe is not a monolithic. There are tremendous differences between the way the different regions are approaching it.
I know.
Different countries, you mean?
I'm an EU citizen as well.
Let me ask another question. This comes from Steve Lockwood. People talked before, you look at Starsky robotics that failed, and they had a long thing about it wasn't their fault. You look at all the issues about AI and machine learning. Are we really getting close to where we can have an AV that's equal to a human driver, or do we need to wait a while?
It depends on where you live. If you live in Phoenix, there are people, of course, it's a very limited pilot, but there are people who are riding every day in these in vehicles that don't even have anyone in them when they pick them up. Cruise, of course, promised this in the past and has been a little bit late with it, but may eventually deliver that. It's not going to happen around the world at once. It's not like someone sells an electric car, you can buy it and take it to any place in the world. It's going to happen city by city. And so there are going to be places in 2030 where you've still never seen one. And there'll be other places in 2030 where people are riding them every day.
So I think quoting what I've been saying for over 10 years now. So the question is not when, but where. So I guess we agree on that. So
yeah, no, I've said the same thing for just as long.
Central Jersey is where. Come to Trenton. We want you. We have a lot of good people who could really use you.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think there'll be highway self-drive everywhere, but that's much more limited in use.
Yeah, but that's for you, Brad. That already has too many ways to get from A to B. That's
So the question is not when, it's where.
Yeah,
Correct.
I also think I just want to caution that sometimes, right now people are using Starsky as an example of AV failure and going the wrong way. I just want to point out that, in my opinion, Starsky's strategy was never truly AV. It was very different. I don't want to get into the details of it, but I think part of the reason why maybe it didn't succeed was because it really wasn't going after full AV like its competitors. It was very, very different product. So I don't like using that one as the example.
Yeah, no, we should not talk about individual companies. I mean,
But
It would be shocking if companies were not dying, right? It would be shocking if there weren't a few falling by the wayside.
But none of these companies are succeeding. None of them have a product. None of them are selling anything. They're still in development. So
no, Starship, we have a product of Starship.
Embark is selling and doing great.
Okay.
Self-driving trucks are selling and making money.
Sorry, where?
Embark self-driving trucks.
Uh-huh.
We are still at the very beginning.
At the very beginning.
If we mimic ourselves to the auto industry, we're still in the 1800s. Okay. And if the Daimler patent is the start in 1886, we aren't to 1900 yet in this. Okay. No. We haven't seen Henry Ford yet. Okay. Yeah. My view.
And hey, I'm going to tell you who in my mind actually has had the best forecasts and predictions. That actually is Elon Musk. And he said in 2013 that within 3 years, most of the driving might be automated. And boom, there was autopilot. You can say many things, but they got some things right.
Hey, Tesla's done a great job, in my opinion, for when you have a person in the loop. They aren't good enough to take a person out of the loop. He needs to be careful and make sure that people are paying attention and so on. But my opinion, you look at that system and what it's done, and I wish he would release the damn data so that, in fact, people could prove that, in fact, these things have substantially enhanced safety of the people that use them. I think it would do him a lot of good, but, that's his call.
So my point is one needs to be careful with these forecasts, obviously. Yeah. By the way, Google has never given a date when they might have one. Yeah. But
let me change
interesting to see what has been announced and actually what we've gotten, and some of it has worked out.
I do policy and I do economics. One of the questions, I guess, is stimulated by what Alan said, and said it's great to be talking about how autonomous vehicles are going to help lower income and disadvantaged people. But how is that going to happen when the companies who are building these things are all for profit?
Because you can make money at it.
For that market.
Because if in fact you can put the service out there at less than 50 cents a vehicle mile, hey, get to an average vehicle occupancy of 2, and you're at 25 cents per passenger mile, and make it, throw another 10 cents in there for profit. That's where the money gets made. And we have to and because this is Moore's law, I think that the software and the technology is the cost of those things goes to zero. Okay. And now you've got to worry about the wheels and the electricity and stuff like that. You can do that for 50 cents a vehicle mile.
I'm not an economist, but explain this to me. Let's just assume for the moment that a bus driver or an Uber driver are maybe not the highest income people on the planet. Let's just assume this for a moment, okay?
They're not. They're working for free. They're slaves.
So you take their job away, but you tell them you get to your not job cheaper now. That is like very similar to like in your latest blog, like negative oil price. So there are some things that just don't add up.
I've surveyed people, Sven, we're getting into jobs again, and asked how many people dreamed of being a cab driver when they grew up, and very few people put up their hands. Uber driver is not a career. It is something that, hey, I can do it piece by piece, hours go, I make some money when I do it, I can pick my own hours. And so there's a lot of people who go for it, but it's not a career.
Yeah, Brett, I will not brush it off because I think we need to open up our aperture here a little bit. With all this AI and connectivity and software and ubiquity and whatnot, not just in the transportation sector and everything. So what is happening with automation and autonomous and AI is not just in transportation. So we need to think a little bit broader, and it shows us again, we are not just talking about a shoebox on a wheel. it's really all these impacts on economies and societies and much broader scale.
So no, I do
There are
agree with that. I think I'm trying to
there are
stay away. Go
millions,
ahead,
there are
Michael.
millions of people who are involved in the car industry. There are lots of taxi drivers.
Yep.
Who actually spend their lives as taxi drivers. My father-in-law.
I don't dispute it.
Yes, but it's a job. It's
But
a profession.
they,
It's not like you say, well, it's not a career. For many people, it is a career. That's what they do.
But they serve an infinitesimal percentage of the trips, and they will always serve those.
Right.
They don't lose their jobs. The people that we unemploy are us, and the trips that we provide are new mobility trips for people. This increases mobility. That's the value. Not to
Americans, my calculations,
scale.
Americans spend 50 billion hours every year doing this. 50 billion hours. The entire productive labor output of the United States is 240 billion hours. And we take 50 billion and use it turning steering wheels. And you're saying, but we don't want to fix that because we worry about the 1 million people who drive cabs for a living having to find other jobs. I mean, that's
I
crazy.
think if we align our time horizon for the job expectations with our expectations for when we see fully automated vehicles, we'll understand that we've got a good long ramp ahead of us to adjust the way we train people. And for these entrepreneurs who operate taxi cabs as small businesses to adjust and pivot and train and develop new businesses. Back to the question that was asked to begin with about policy solutions versus business solutions, we've got great entrepreneurial opportunities to develop small businesses to meet the mobility needs of people who live in underserved areas.
Yeah, a great an analog to that, by the way, is about Uber. One group of people who love Uber in New York are Black people. Why do they love it? Because cabs never used to pick them up. Cabs would drive right by them and not pick them up. Uber always picks them up. Now, Uber wasn't out there trying to solve the problem of discrimination against Black people in getting cab rides, but they solved it just because they wanted to make a business that would sell as many rides as they could. So there are ways in which profit-motivated companies will end up serving the problems of society without necessarily having set out to do it.
Let me ask Jim one more question.
I might be getting at time. I think this is where we need to see it. It's not just two dots that we somehow connect and then extrapolate and then we know where we are going. So this is really, it's transportation. It has so massive impacts on each and everything. And again, it's going to be tough to figure it out. And I foresee it might be getting tougher for the next few years, but we will figure it out somehow. Let's do it all together with a shot.
I've got one related question to Jim. When you guys got Embark started, is your purpose to get truck drivers out of work, or is there some other economic force that's driving it?
Yeah, well, that is, I think that's an inappropriate way to ask. I mean, I know what they're getting at. So look, here's the deal. First of all, actually, a very interesting story about Embark. It started out as a very different business. The two founders, very young, dropouts from Waterloo, went into Y Combinator. We partnered with them, and we were launching this sort of golf cart, self-driving golf cart system for retirement communities and other small communities. Didn't love the business, and when they got out of YC, I sat down with them, really, really bright young guys, and I said, "Look, don't love this business. What else do you think you could do? What are you interested in?" And they came up. They said, "We were sitting on the side of the freeway, getting over to Y Combinator. Our car broke down, and we noticed all these trucks going by with help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. And they're like, we could solve that problem with technology. We're building these robotic AV systems that can make these trucks self-driving, and we could solve a problem for the industry. And wait, I think it's a good business idea." And this is kind of where it all evolved from. And the truth is, there are anywhere from half a million to 1 million long-haul truck driving job postings available. It's a very, very challenging job. On the one hand, it's a good job to get people into the middle class. I get it, who maybe haven't graduated from college. On the other hand, most of the people in that industry don't want to necessarily be in that industry. They still want to be driving trucks. So Embark's solution is to do the long haul and let people still be truck drivers in their local community so they can be home with their family that night. It's not going to get rid of all truck jobs. In fact, it may create even more the kind of jobs they want. So I look at this as technology solving a massive problem, $1 trillion market opportunity, and helping people still do the jobs they love to do, because we're not going to be doing these truck AVs within cities. So hopefully that helps answer some of the questions.
But Jim, Embark's technology also, even if you don't take the truck driver out of there, so improves the work environment for a truck driver that it delivers so much value to that long haul industry. Can you imagine being in a job 10 hours a day? You don't pay attention for a nanosecond, you die. The pressure on those people, the truck driving is such a tough jobs. They need help. They need help to improve their work environment. This fundamentally, even if you don't take them out, the value that you provide in there, and in fact, the regulators should take a look at that and say, hey, we'll give you another hour of runtime so you can even better feed your family. You'll be less stressed. You'll have a better work condition and all that. And we don't even have to take the person out of there.
To give some evidence-based data that Michael likes, the turnover in the truck driver industry in many years is over 100%.
Yeah.
It's
well, another evidence-based, 38 states in the United States, truck driving is the #1 job. It used to be secretaries.
Actually, entrepreneur is the #1 job. It's just not grouped as one thing.
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
Well,
a lot of truck drivers are entrepreneurs because they're out there driving themselves. You know,
they're That's right. They're self-employed.
Well, we're at the 1 hour time limit. This could go on.
Oh no, already.
I don't know. Before I turn it over to Fred, Alan, did you have any comments you want to make, since you're one of the people behind this as well?
Well, I think I want to thank everybody here on the panel for joining in with this thing that Dick and I sort of put together. This was a first time try at this. The response from I guess the marketplace, people out there, people apparently wanted to come in. There's still 139, 140 people out there. Who knows how many on YouTube? We thank everybody for joining in. We tried to make this somewhat interactive. I don't think we succeeded extremely well. We, I think, got to 3 questions, and it's a shame. But Dick and everybody here, this is a prelim to the Automated Vehicle Symposium, still scheduled for Detroit. Jane's still trying.
San Diego.
I mean, not Detroit, San Diego. Sorry, yes.
It doesn't matter what city it's scheduled for because it ain't happening.
Yeah. Jane's still trying to make it happen there. We don't know. We need more evidence-based information to make proper decisions going forward. But hey, I've had a great time. I hope everybody else has had a great time. Dick?
Yeah, Fred, do you want to officially close it out?
Absolutely. Wow, this has been really terrific. This has been the Driverless New Normal, the best of times or the toughest of times. We hope you've enjoyed the debate. We have much more being planned, and so we'd love to get your thoughts about the topics and participants. We've been watching all of the comments. We wish we'd been able to get to so many more, but they're going to stay up there. You can find us at zoom-tank.com and on SmartDrivingCar.com. Don't forget the Automated Vehicle Symposium that was just mentioned, still slated. Keep our fingers crossed for the end of July in San Diego. The info for that is at automatedvehiclessymposium.org. Thank you for taking part. We hope you stay healthy and safe. And for those who want to, if you're available, you're welcome to hang in here for a while and stay online and continue some of the discussion. Thank you.
And I'll ask you to put in the Zoom Tank website links to all of the people here have blogs or podcasts or other such things which people can follow to for more information. Hopefully you'll put those links there.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I wish, it was a very active conversation. We could have had this going for another hour or so, I think.
Yeah, we could have clearly do, and we will do another one of these, I think, before ABS. We
Dick,
could do one on jobs.
Why don't you go to more of the questions, Dick, and let's take some more. There's still some participants out there. There's still some questions. Maybe let's go to them.
Well, somebody asked, if all this stuff is so great and easy, how come we don't have more freight bots running around in the middle of the night? The roads are clear. If the technology is all that good, how come it's not out there?
We're waiting for Jeff Bezos to put it out there. He must be working on it.
Brad, when's the Starship coming to my place in Palo Alto?
Well, if you get to the west side of Palo Alto or the south side, I mean, you probably could get a delivery from the ones in Mountain View.
Mr. Templeton, you're not answering my question.
Yeah, because nobody ever names a date.
Palo Alto.
I mean, the constraint is, we'd have to find some way to get the parts to build millions of robots, and the part supply chains are a little blocked right now.
Oh, with all due respect, Brad, no, that's not a great answer.
Well, no, because people who name
all right, let's go to the next question.
People who name dates are crazy.
Jim. Yeah, people don't realize. I mean, Embark has self-driving AV trucks on the road, 24/7, happy now. The only thing is they have, by law, still have to have a driver in there. They don't actually need the driver. Society's not ready, quite yet, but I think will be very soon. I think many industries are ready. The cost savings are tremendous and the technology is proven. So I think to answer the question, there are companies out there already doing this. You just don't know.
Yeah, Starship and Waymo are the only.
With all due respect, you should have answered earlier that the legal situation is the biggest problem, because you just said they are required to have a driver by law. But if that wasn't the case, it could basically take them out today. That's what you said, right?
Yeah, I think maybe in some place, like these are long journeys across country, so that they probably could swap in and out a driver. But until it's in every state,
so they could do like a Pony Express, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I'm kind of surprised by, I've not seen that many COVID-19 questions. One person did ask, with autonomous vehicles, how do we ensure they're going to be clean and to be sanitary? Is that an issue that's going to keep people from using them?
It's a challenging. Actually, I'm writing an article right now for Forbes, which I'll release later this week, about how COVID could be the crisis that kills public transit, because people will be afraid to get back into it for some time. And
there is that ride sharing issue.
Yeah, the challenge is people don't even want to get in Ubers right now because the guy before you was probably coughing his lungs out on the armrest. So you are going to have to see vehicles which are designed to be cleaned. You're going to have to see mechanisms by which either the occupant can clean them or a service can clean them. That will be pretty expensive, but we're willing to spend pretty ridiculous amounts of money to keep our economy going during these crises. So I think that money, if this happens again, will be available. One of the plus things is that if you're designing a self-driving taxi, as Waymo wants to do and Cruise and Zoox want to do, you have to design it so the interior can be replaced anyway, because if it's going to go for 500,000 miles, it's not going to go down the same interior. Once you've designed it to have a replaceable interior, you can design it to have a cleanable interior. And so you could deal with a crisis like this, something that's a lot more difficult for privately owned cars.
These are opportunities.
Yeah, we've seen startups that are actually trying to solve this problem, because Uber and Lyft, they've got to get back out there, and there's no way unless we're all sure that this is there's disinfectants, it's clean. Yeah, or we dress like that.
We could spend a lot less money because everyone is going to be sure that what they want to do is to be absolutely safe wherever they go, not just in their car. Everyone's going to walk around with a life support system, right?
So I think we just put bleach. We put bleach in every vehicle for people to drink. Then they can protect themselves.
It's Lysol, Brad. You drink Lysol.
But here's the funny thing.
Life's a risk.
The other thing that
life's not worth living without a risk.
100%. We have not yet proven that you can live forever. Life is the one thing we know ends in death. We're doing all this stuff to prevent to keep us alive. And now we've got COVID-19, which is killing a lot of us and damaging a lot of society and everything else. And now we're talking about autonomous driverless vehicles. I mean, there's a little disconnect here, I think.
Well, COVID is one of the few things that's going to kill more people than cars, and it has killed more people than cars in the United States this year. One thing that Donald Trump actually said.
Wait, no, Trump, no.
Listen, I'm not. No. It's ultraviolet light. It's ultraviolet light, which I realize the Swedes don't understand the part about sunlight. But ultraviolet light actually can kill viruses. If you go about the 220 nanometer band, you get a frequency of light that doesn't hurt people and does destroy virus particles in the air and on surfaces. So I think we're actually going to see vehicles with tubed installed to emit really high, powerful ultraviolet radiation, not sticking up your butt like Trump said, but actually in the car to sterilize the car.
Dick,
What's
more
the
questions
One
from the
question, let me
audience.
ask another question here. Someone had a question for Jim. She made a comment about OEMs perhaps going bust because they can't figure out how to make AVs. Is that something you really believe there'll be, you look to the future that we'll have fewer OEMs than we have right now?
100%. I mean, the truth is, I believed it before the pandemic. It is now going to happen much faster than I ever thought it was going to happen. I think there'll be very famous brands that we're all comfortable, we've grown up with that won't be around in the next, 5, 10, 15 years. I think there'll be others that will survive, but they won't be doing the business that they're doing today. They may be just vehicle manufacturers for other AV service industry leaders. And I think some will survive, and some who are taking this seriously and being aggressive and either building their own solutions or partnering with others or going to acquire other companies will be able to make it through. The issue is the OEMs are in a really, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy. Like, they're in a tough spot. This is the classic innovator's dilemma. They have a great business that is not going to be great. It isn't great today, and it will be even worse in the near future. Selling these vehicles to people is a dead business in the future soon. And if that's how you make your money, but let me just finish. If that's how you make your money, it's going to be hard for you to think differently. Like that, people are not necessarily going to buy cars anymore, but they're going to need to purchase services to get access to these vehicles in a robo-taxi-like service. If that is the future, you have to change your existing business. Otherwise, those revenue streams go to zero. In addition to the fact of this whole idea of going to a dealership and buying a car with people trying to take advantage of you and then having to go to these places to get them fixed and getting ripped off there. Like all those systems and existing very profitable business models are going away, and they need to innovate. And many of them are just not going to get there.
Jim, I think that in rural areas that the 1 minute robotaxi is quite some distance away. So 30 to 40% of people will be buying cars for a few decades to come.
Let's have Michael Senna say something. Come on, Michael.
No, it's just so interesting. I think of the people who are on the panel right now, the people who've actually worked in car companies. Jane has worked in Toyota. Sven has worked at BMW. I've worked for BMW and for Volvo and many other companies. When I hear someone say the business model of car companies is going to disappear because of autonomous vehicles or because we're going to have mobility as a service, it just doesn't connect. It doesn't commute. We have most of the cars that are sold today are not sold in cities. Most of the cars today that are sold all around the world, and especially in the newer markets, are to people who are not living in Brooklyn. They're not living in Palo Alto, and they have a need for a car. Whether that's going to be driven by a robot or not is irrelevant. The future cars are going to be around for a long time. The main reason that a car company is going to go out of business today, and it could be GM, it could be Ford, has nothing to do with driverless mobility. It has to do with the basic structure and the value of the car. China, and I've written about this, and maybe you haven't read what I've written, Jim, but China right now is positioning itself to become the supplier of 50% of the value of they're producing the platforms to skateboards for electric cars. Tesla, whose value right now is their price of $700 or plus a share versus 30 for GM, isn't because they're disrupting the car industry as it is right now. They're a car company, but the value that they're providing right now is much more. They're taking much more out of every vehicle that they're selling than the car companies can today. And our governments, Western governments, both in Europe and in the United States, are helping to China to take over the car industry. ICEs will disappear. Battery electric vehicles will come in, and the car companies cannot make money selling battery electric vehicles. It has nothing to do with autonomy or driverless or ADAS or anything else. It has to do with the value of the vehicle and how much money you can pull out of it. And China is positioned right now And Tesla
Right,
taught them how to do this. Tesla
It
gave them.
sounds like you agree with Jim that the Chinese companies will take over and the Western companies will disappear.
And actually, let me just make that. Thanks for making that point. And I would say that we kind of agree, but for different reasons.
Mhm.
I think that maybe what I should say is, from a positive standpoint, is for American OEMs to remain competitive in that world, they need to figure out how to develop the EVs, because that's the future. And if we can make these robo-taxis a reality and charge as a service, not only can they, be competitive with that, they can actually beat the Chinese or any other OEMs who are competing in that space. So
I disagree with that, because when you summon a taxi or an Uber, you don't care what brand is on the front of it. And that's the value that these car companies have, is a lot of it is in their name.
Yeah, I know, I agree. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I'm saying they have to be more of a service, a direct-to-consumer service. That's who's going to make the money here, assuming, we're talking about robotaxis in the cities. And frankly, I do think it's also going to happen in the suburban areas. I mean, the fact is that if you have a robotaxi and you can get driven to work, and by the way, I think the pandemic is going to change everyone's attitude. We're going to be doing a lot more working from home. We're not going back to the old way. There's a new normal, and we're going to be comfortable, not 100% working from home, but we're going to be comfortable letting people work from wherever they are. And when you have to get into the big city to meet with all the people at work, you can get into your robotaxi, you get driven there in an hour, comfortably catch up on your Netflix movie, do Zoom video calls, get into your place of work, though, 1 or 2 days a week, go back to live in your suburban area. So I think AVs actually solve a problem there. In those very rural areas, I think that's going to be the last frontier. Getting off topic, there was a lot to cover there, but I do think that the OEMs, look, I know I'm not from the OEM industry. I get it, and I'm going to first admit that, but it allows me to think a little differently, right? It's like if I was in the magazine industry, I'd be like, there's no way this internet thing is ever going to make magazines go out. We've been around for 100 years. Are you kidding me? Everyone's going to be reading magazines. Like, I get it. Like, I think if you've been in the industry, so hard to think outside, and then people from outside think differently are not always right. And so I think there's value on both sides there. And I appreciate from people from within the industry how they think, and I'm giving a different perspective from people from outside the industry.
What do the rest of you think about the idea that the new normal, whenever we get to it, will be good for AVs? We already said it's probably not going to be good for transit, but is it really going to be good for AVs?
Mobility machines are transit, please. Okay, they provide mobility. I don't know why the transit industry hasn't embraced it. Hey, if more people are going to move to the suburbs, the conventional transit systems, they have no market to serve. I mean, who's going to want to live in cities and whatever and so on? I mean,
nobody embraces the thing that is their whole way of thinking.
Well, and what these mobility machines allow you to do is allow you to take a technology and fit it to the demand, as opposed to saying, we're going to run down this route. If you want to use it, you have to now follow into what the heck we've provided out there.
You know that, and I know that, but they call it the last mile. That's the only thing they think.
Oh, the hell with the last mile.
It'll be the last mile for our trains.
No, it's not last mile. Nobody goes downtown anymore. No, 80% of the trips are not downtown. 4% of the trips nationwide are served by transit. 4.
Yeah, it's going down.
That's a niche market. Okay, and that.
By the way, it's double in Europe, because Europe is so much more transit oriented.
Well, no, but you look at Sweden. I don't know.
Michael
has his car. He likes his car. I mean,
Europeans love cars. I mean, everyone says, "Oh my God,
course they love cars."
The United States isn't. It's 93% of miles in U.S. are in cars, and 83% are in Europe. So miles in cars in Europe.
Jane, let me ask you. We haven't heard from you for a while. People talked about the death of automobile companies and the total change in the structure of urban transportation. Do you have a clear answer for us on both those?
No. No.
Answer anyway.
Yeah, say something anyway. I mean,
say something. Yeah. No. I don't really just need to hear the sound of my voice. Dick and I were corresponding before the session started about because we were on the phone together when the Twin Towers were hit on 9/11, and we were reflecting on what that impact had been as a comparison to where we are now. And there were certainly some long-term changes that kicked in at that time. And I think it's the case now that we'll see more teleworking now that we've gotten through this obstacle. I've been in tech for enough years now. I've been teleworking for a decade. It seems like old news. We're not going to have automated vehicles on the road in any significant number for many years. And I think that's Sven's point. I don't think anyone disagrees. So post-COVID impact of AVs, we're not going to see it. It's not an issue.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.
And I live in a city that's transit dependent. So our public sector is really sorting out how to enforce social distancing and how to clean the system frequently enough to keep it safe for public health purposes. So again, it's a different experience of the world.
One of the questions that came in was, how do we go through the transition where we have a mix of autonomous vehicles and non-autonomous vehicles? And I guess you're saying, Jane, and maybe Michael, nothing to worry about. It's been a long time before we'll have to worry about that.
I think we do have a future problem with the integration of increasingly automated vehicles, but I don't know that it's being affected by COVID-19.
There is no choice but to have that transition, and so therefore that's the problem on the table.
Look,
and I guess it comes down again to the point. It's a question of where you first have it in areas and in little pockets where you know what might happen, and therefore you're in control. And it might be a mix that is more on one end than the other end of the spectrum. Maybe there are only autonomous vehicles and only a few human-driven vehicles, as opposed to the opposite. So it really needs to be staged, I guess. Otherwise, if you just let them loose today, good luck.
Well, this may be where the regulators become useful to us, because if we've got 6 or 7 fleets of automated vehicles operating each in their own particular driving style, we're going to, considerably degrade safety on the roadways, because the human drivers aren't going to know how to interpret the interactions, how to be defensive in the presence of these different driving styles. And then as we upgrade our fleets, as each of the manufacturers shift the behavior of their fleets times 8 or 9, that further degrades safety. So that future is complex.
Jane, right now, humans, we have a whole distribution of driving styles.
Mm-hmm.
There's I drive very slow. I let everybody pass me. I'm very defensive. But Michael out there, he's like, he has to be first or something. There is already a big distribution of driving styles. This is just a couple other ones. And in fact, the marketplace is going to take care of this. There are going to be winners and losers. How many car companies existed in the United States in 2010, in 1910 and 1920? There were 50, I don't know,
hundreds,
whatever.
Hundreds. There were hundreds.
There were hundreds. So, yep. This thing's they're gonna be, Google's a winner. Okay. Amazon's a winner. There ends up being winners and losers. I don't know, whatever.
It's already illegal to hit people.
That's not the question about this mixing in traffic. I think if you mix things in traffic, then winners and losers basically means people alive and people dead. And so
no.
About winners and losers.
No,
I think that's wrong, Sven. I think it's already.
I always think it's wrong.
Well, no, it's already illegal to hit people, and the companies making it's already scared to death of the fact that it's already illegal to hit people, and they'll also be pilloried in the public opinion if they hit people. They have really strong motives not to do this. Regulation isn't needed to give them a motive to try and make their vehicles safe.
The marketplace does that. Marketplace does that.
The law does that. The law does it already. The law already will punish it.
But you don't need the law. Nobody would have fined Uber $60 billion for killing somebody. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
one of the
I would
questions,
say one last thing on this. I think it's a linchpin issue for me. The world of AV robotaxis works in my mind the best when it's only AV. When we introduce human into this, if you look at all the data today, almost all the accidents were human errors that crashed into AVs, that, you know, someone signaled to do something that you would normally do. But when humans are involved, this is always going to be a little dangerous and tricky. I think that, to Sven's point, I mean, maybe the way this happens is a brave mayor in America says, hey, you want to come into my city, then you have to leave your car at the airport and start taking one of these AV robotaxis. And then it's only in that city everyone sees, wow, that works. There's like never accidents, and it really worked. And then I think it'll spiral from there. Frankly, it probably won't happen in America first.
No, it'll probably happen in
But
China.
Jim, what
Right.
about, yes,
Right.
you're right.
Yeah.
But Jim, what about the
Possibly.
humans who are pedestrians and bicyclists?
Let's all move there.
Jane was asking a question.
No,
Oh, yeah,
I was
yeah.
just making the point, if humans are the problem in cities, Jim, then what about the pedestrians and the bicyclists,
Yeah, this goes
the
back-
animals and,
Yeah,
you know.
I think it goes back to your point. First of all, I actually think that, and I know, and this I'm probably gonna open another can of worms, but I think that the software is going to be better than humans in driving, period. So I think we're going to get there. I think that so all the things that could go wrong with human drivers is going to be a lot less when it's just non-human drivers. So
They'll
that's-
make new
Totally-
mistakes.
totally
They'll
disagree.
make inhuman
Okay, no,
Totally
mistakes.
Second one is,
Yeah.
I think in the world where we have only AV robotaxis, we're actually going to design urban settings to be so much more beautiful and pleasant and safer. But we'll have ways that it will not be impossible, but much harder for these vehicles to kill people. I think it's going to be great. And that goes back a little bit to your infrastructure. I don't think we have to do a lot there. It's just going to be, in fact, there was some experiment in San Francisco because there aren't any vehicles, like we closed Market Street and there are more bicycles and people walking. It's really amazing what's going to happen. It's going to be a better world for everyone.
Yeah. Jim is right about the safety, because the vehicles, if someone puts a car on the road and it's killing more people than the average human being, or hurting more people than the average human being, the legal system is going to shut that down so fast, and they're going to be out of business so fast that no one would dare deploy something if they weren't convinced that wasn't going to happen.
Marketplace is going to shut them down.
yeah,
Okay, and that's what happens. It's the software probably will never be better than a human who's paying attention and is competent. The problem is that we're not paying attention and competent all the time. And so we were doing great, and then boom. And apparently that's where the software, it doesn't have the misbehavior that we do. It doesn't get ticked off and you know?
Some software.
let me add one more.
Yeah, that's what we have to take out of the software. The problem is the misbehavior. All those 90% of the crashes, it's misbehavior that causes it. Misbehavior. Running
So
a
Michael, why do you
No,
think it's wrong?
totally.
Michael, you said it was wrong. Michael?
It's not misbehavior all the time, Alan. There are things that
Most of the
occur
time.
that you just, and it, you know, I can't determine what someone else is going to do. So another driver moves slightly into my lane.
It's their misbehavior.
It's not their misbehavior.
They moved in your lane. That's not good behavior.
Yeah, it's your lane.
It's your lane. The basic rule of the road is
Got my name on
your
it.
lane, don't hit anything. I mean, that's
Yeah.
driving. Not that hard.
Actually, believe it or not, I calculate
I
about
don't know.
a third of all people never have an accident in their lives. We're not quite as bad as we think we are. I have never had one.
Some people don't misbehave.
Knock on wood. Yeah,
I
my
don't
father
know.
lived.
I've
my
never
father
misbehaved
lived-
myself.
My father started driving when he was very young, and he lived to 88, and he never had an accident.
Most
he drove,
of us,
He drove a Jeep.
yeah,
Yeah.
most of
Let
us
me,
don't.
let me, by way of
Yes.
closing out, because I think we've been, our
We
number
still
of
have
people listening
78
is
people out there, Dick.
No, but I think we've
I
been
mean,
going
what
on
the
long
heck?
enough.
Don't
Yeah.
people have anything better to do?
That's pretty sad. Well, it depends how many of them are some of your professors or some of your students, Alan.
Probably. Yeah, I'm going to flunk them all. No.
Before we close, I was going to see if people, just to go around the room and see if people had any last minute thoughts, as long as you keep them less than 5 minutes or less than 1 minute. on what we heard today. I enjoyed I certainly enjoyed listening.
Yeah, I think it was a great discussion, and really thanks for having me. And my last statement again is, let's just don't look at a few points and connect them and think where things are going. It is going to happen. We will have smart, intelligent, and automated vehicles, but we have no idea what it's going to be. And my most favorite comparison is, if in the 1990s, I would have thought I know what a bookstore is, and I think I understand what this internet thing is, then to extrapolate what Amazon might be, completely off. And I think that's the same with knowing what an automobile is, knowing what maybe autonomous is, and then knowing what an autonomous car is, completely off. So it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
I'm amazed you said that, Sven, because of course you criticized me for being an outsider to the car industry and trying to tell it what its future is.
And I'm amazed that you are saying that. I've been telling you this analogy a million times.
But here's the point, which is that Michael talked about J.D. Power surveying car buyers about their opinions of what car companies should do. I compare these surveys, and I see a lot of surveys of the public asking what they think about self-driving vehicles. And I think this is like asking people what they're going to do with their iPhone in 2005, a couple of years before it comes out. They just do not have the capacity. The data on what they think is curious, but it's completely irrelevant in terms of understanding the future. And I think, unfortunately, inside the car OEMs, the same thing is often true. Not all of them. There are smart people inside all of these OEMs, people who know as much as we do inside of all these OEMs. The challenge for them is the ability to turn supertankers 90 degrees. And it's not within the capacity of supertankers to do that. Companies that are led by their founders, companies that are led by Steve Jobs or Larry Page or Bill Gates and so on throughout history, are the only companies that have had the ability to make those turns. And of course, startups. And so this is why we predict that these car OEMs will be the victims of the people who are from outside their industry and don't understand how it works, sometimes because those people don't understand what those people think they know about how it works.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Jane, do you have any closing comments? Or
Yeah, I'm looking forward within my lifetime to enjoying shared mobility with fully automated vehicles.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up with me too, and thank you for inviting me to this AV party. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot, and I've hopefully shared a little bit of a different perspective. I would say that, and I've said this when I joined the board of Cruise and invested in 2013. This is the biggest sea change in technology that we've seen since the internet, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this. I do think that we're going to see the majority of the world in self-driving vehicles in some capacity in our lifetime. And I think it's going to be a much better world because of that. And I'm very excited to be part of it.
Yeah. Alan, do you have any last comments?
Let's go to Michael and then, Michael, do you want
to? Today was the day that I was going to be leaving from Sweden to travel to the United States and spend almost 4 weeks there, ending with the SmartDrivingCar Summit in Princeton. So I was going to meet friends I haven't seen in 2 years, go on a fishing trip that I've been doing for the last 40 years up in Canada, traveling through New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and finally ending up at Princeton. But that trip was canceled for some reason that I still can't quite understand. But this little event that we've had just now at least gives me an opportunity to spend part of the time that would have spent at Princeton at the summit with friends I would have seen there, talking about the same things that we would have discussed at the summit. So thanks very much. I really enjoyed it.
Well,
Let's
Michael,
do it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you for all that. This is, I'm laser focused on this stuff in case people don't really understand. We are still at the very beginning. We really don't know where it's going to take us or whether or not we'll get there. I keep thinking that this is a real opportunity to deliver real value to a lot of people who unfortunately haven't had it in the past. And so that's part of why, you know, I'm working like feverishly to make sure that Trenton becomes a welcoming environment for this technology, so that somebody who's developing this technology might be willing to come there and help the people there improve their quality of life. I keep thinking that if it does that, then in fact, that is the impetus to grow. Again, we're still at zero. We're still at zero. And we have an enormous way to go, enormous opportunities for a lot of people coming out of this pandemic. We're going to go after those opportunities. Jim's going to help us go after them. I mean, you know, they want to go after it. We all want to go after it. So in a sense, that's why I still think it is the best of times in this weird world.
No, I think it's a very exciting time, and I'll say I agree vehemently with half of what I heard. No,
anyway,
listen,
thank you to our audience for coming in and being with us. We'll put out a survey. We must have had 1 million questions. We got to none of them. I don't know how but hopefully you must not have had very much to do this afternoon, and that you decide to stick with us.
Yes,
and
I want to figure out some way to print this stuff out. There are 191 messages and 25 questions.
Well, maybe what we should do is just print them out so that people know what the questions are, or maybe get back to the people who ask the questions, make sure they'd be happy with us distributing them, and we'll just do it somehow, right? We'll figure it out.
Alan, Zoom, they can tell me how to print them. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Alan, let me point out, we got a couple of comments that we just should read very quickly. Carlos Holguin wrote, "Hearing you is a great investment of time." And Bern Grush wrote afterwards, "It has been worthwhile." Thanks, Alan.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, hey, we had 2 people. I paid them. I said, "You'll get your check. Check's in the mail."
Checks in the mail.
And I don't think those are your students, Alan.
No, but yeah, well, yeah.
Well,
anyway.
All I say is, I think the price was right.
the price was right.
Next one's going to be. Say that when we increase the price.
Anyway.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
This has been. I don't know how we pulled this off. Somewhat, you know, what the hell. Zoom is great, isn't it? I mean, or not
it helps
great.
a lot.
At least allows us to do this.
Everybody.
Anyway, thank you.
The website again is zoom-tank.com. You can find Alan and I at smartdrivingcar.com. And don't forget that Automated Vehicles Symposium at automatedvehiclessymposium.org, still scheduled for the end of July in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and please stay safe.
Thanks.
Absolutely.